Okay, so now we're over here at the lathe, and we're going to go ahead and get the pen mandrel. And I like to start by just go ahead and stick it in the headstock there. We're going to take this nut off, and I'm going to pull off 3 of the bushings. What these bushings do is help us get our pieces lined up so that we know we have them to the appropriate depth. I'm going to take whichever piece I want to be the front of my pen, where my fingers would hold it, and I'm going to slide that on, making sure that those lines that I made, which you probably can't see it, but it's right there, making sure those are in the middle. I'm going to put 1 more bushing on, slide the second blank on so that those lines match up, and then put the last 2 bushings on and tighten this nut back up. And we want this tight enough that our blanks are not going to spin. We're going to start putting some pressure on them, and we don't want them to spin, so those are good and tight. We're going to slide our tool rest setup over. We're going to loosen up and slide over our tailstock. The live tailstock should fit right in the end of the mandrel. Once you get that, tighten it up on the back side here so that it's not moving. Then make sure that our tailstock tightening lever is loose, and we're going to go ahead and spin this just a bit so we're adding some pressure. What that's doing is helping to push the mandrel back into the headstock here. Once we have it tight enough without going over tight, we're going to tighten that lever. Then we're going to go ahead, we're going to come in and get our tool rest set up. If you remember back to the safety video, we want it just above the center, height-wise, from our pen. And we want this as close as we can get it without the blanks actually hitting it. So right there, it hit it just a little bit, so I needed to back it up. And right there, it's spinning freely, and it's not hitting anything. I can spin that, and we're not hitting. So first thing we're going to start with is the roughing gouge. And what we're going to do once we start this up is we're going to take and we're just going to run this back and forth a little bit, and we can change the angle of the gouge just a little bit. Now what this is going to do is just get the rough shape of the pen done, and then we'll move on to a skew later on. Again, keep this tight on the tool rest, make sure we have a good firm grip on it, and we're just going to gently move it back and forth. Keep in mind as you first start, our blanks are not round, they are square, so we're just knocking off a little bit of the edge, so we're not going to put a whole lot of pressure on it yet. Once we get down a little further, we can put a little pressure on. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in here just a bit so you can see a little better what we're looking at. And when I first turn this on, I'm going to turn it on low speed, step to the side just in case there's some sort of issue. Okay, everything looks good. We'll go ahead and slowly add a little speed to it until we get up to about max speed. Then we're just going to come in nice and gentle. And a lot of this we can do just by listening to it. We can tell we're not taking a whole lot off. We're just going to go back and forth for a little bit. I'm going to work on this one for just a second, and then we'll come back to the video. Okay, so you can see here I've spent a little bit of time on the front piece, haven't touched the back piece here yet, and you can see the difference that we have. This piece here is mostly round now. There's still a couple of flat spots, but this is getting down to a point where we can start putting a little bit more pressure on it because it's round and we're not going to knock it off with these corners. This one I still need to spend a fair bit of time on. I haven't even touched yet. Once I get this down to where it's similar to this, we're going to go ahead and push that tool rest in just a little bit more so that we make sure that we're keeping that tool rest as close as possible. So we'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, so we've gotten both these pieces down to where they are mostly round now. A couple of flat spots, but they're mostly round. Now we're at a point where we can start putting a little bit of profile on there, trying to figure out what exactly do we want this pen to look like. Do we want it just to be straight? Do we want it to have a little bit of curve to it? Do we want it to dip in a little bit, be a little convex, a little concave? We have lots of options there as for what we can do. We're going to keep working this with the same skew, or sorry, the gouge that we were using, the roughing gouge. We're going to keep at it with that for a little bit. And the other piece that we're going to start doing is trying to get our edges so that they're down close to where these bushings are without actually hitting these bushings. These bushings are a guide. We ultimately want our pen blanks to be the same diameter as these bushings, so that when we put the pen pieces together, it fits flush and smooth without any sharp or rough edges. I'm also at a point here where I need to move this in a little bit because I've taken off some material and created a gap. And again, we want it about as close as we can get it without actually touching so that it's safe for us. Sorry, the camera's moving there on me. So we're going to go ahead and work out this just a little bit more, and then we'll come back in a minute. Here, starting to take this down a little bit so we're closer to the bushing. Kind of give me an idea of what I need my overall blank diameter to be when I'm done. And I do this a little bit at both sides, again, kind of as a guide, so that I can start to visualize things as we get closer to finishing up. At this point, since it's fully round, it's okay to put a little bit of pressure on here. We don't want a lot of pressure so we don't break our blank or cause it to explode, but a little bit of pressure. Okay, so as you can see, we're getting down to a point now where we're getting close to the bearings. There's still enough room there that we have some room to work. But here's where we're really going to start doing our shaping of the pen blanks. This is where we want to start being careful as to how much pressure we apply so that we don't cause our blank to basically explode. I tend to like mine a little narrower at the front and the back, have a little flare to them. But it's kind of up to you, and there's lots of designs you can look at to get some idea. I'm going to take it real easy when I'm here on the edge so I don't go and hit the bearing with the gouge. That will dull it. And again, I'm just kind of shaping my overall profile here. It's okay if you have some divots at this point. When we go to the skew, we're going to get that cleaned up. We're just working on our overall general profile. It's also okay to rotate the gouge depending on where you're cutting to be able to get better access to it. You'll notice me doing that quite a bit, especially at the end. Most of the time I'll have it with the open part pointed away from me so that it sends the chips and the dust flying the opposite direction, but sometimes you don't really have that choice. So I'm pretty happy with the overall profile that I have right now, and you can stop it periodically and check and kind of see where you're at if you like. There's nothing wrong with that. Now we're going to change to the skew. What this does, this gives us a longer flat edge so that we can blend things together more, whereas that's rounded and takes out gouges, just as the name implies. This is flatter and longer, so we can run this along here and we can shape it and we can get out some of these grooves or bumps that we might have created using the gouge. see as you watch that, it gets a lot smoother as I start using this because it's taken off bigger swaths of material. And I'm pretty happy with that profile on my front one, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the back and do the same thing here. I have to get this front edge a little closer to the bearing. Again, one of my main concerns is working out the divot. You can kind of see one going right here, another one at the front. That's what I'm trying to work out with the skew. And again, not pressing very hard. At this point, there's not a whole lot of wood left there, so we don't want to have a blowout. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and stop just so I can check, take a closer look at it and feel. And I'm going to take the center down here just a little bit more before I come back and start sanding.